It all started on a crisp Monday morning. I was in my workshop crafting a custom oak dining table for a longtime client. The smell of freshly cut wood filled the air, mingling with the low hum of my tools. It was my haven, a place of focus and creativity. But that morning, my peace was shattered. A knock on the workshop door echoed through the space. Wiping the sawdust off my hands, I opened the door to find a woman in a sharply tailored suit and a man with a clipboard standing on my doorstep. They introduced themselves as representatives from the local Homeowner Association. Mr. Hayes, we're here to discuss the matter of your business operating within the neighborhood limits, the woman said, her smile sharp and calculated. I'm sorry, but my workshop isn't part of your homeowner association jurisdiction, I replied, already sensing trouble. Her smile didn't falter. That's where you're mistaken. This area falls under the community guidelines, and we require all property owners to register and comply with our regulations. I knew my rights. My workshop, though close to the homeowner association's boundaries, was legally exempt. I had verified this when purchasing the property. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not interested in joining your association. My business is independent and has no connection to the homeowner association. The man with the clipboard frowned and scribbled something down. The woman's smile tightened. Mr. Hayes' refusal to comply could lead to penalties. We strongly encourage cooperation. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice firm. Because if it is, I'd advise you to rethink your approach. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't reply. Instead, she handed me a stack of papers. We'll be in touch. They left and I closed the door, feeling uneasy. Something about their demeanor didn't sit right with me. Over the next few days, I noticed strange cars idling near my property. Karen, one of the more outspoken neighbors and an avid supporter of the Homeowner Association, began spreading rumors about my workshop violating community standards. Then things escalated. One evening, as I locked up for the night, I found a note pinned to my door. It read, "This is your last warning. Comply or face the consequences." My heart pounded as I scanned the dark street, but no one was in sight. I reported the incident to the local police, but they dismissed it as a prank. A week later, the nightmare truly began. I arrived at my workshop early in the morning to find the door broken open. Inside, chaos reigned. Tools were scattered, wood pieces smashed, and my latest project lay in ruins. Spray painted across the wall in bright red letters were the words, "Homeowner Association or nothing." Rage and disbelief coursed through me. I called the police again, demanding they investigate the break-in. While I waited for their arrival, I documented the destruction, taking photos of every detail. When the officers finally arrived, they took my statement, but seemed reluctant to take the incident seriously. "It's probably just some kids," one officer said dismissively. "We'll look into it." Frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed security cameras around my property and began researching the Homeowner Association's leadership. That's when I discovered Meredith Lang, the Homeowner Association president, a woman notorious for her manipulative tactics and underhanded deals. I reached out to a local attorney to ensure my rights were protected. He assured me that the Homeowner Association had no legal grounds to force me into compliance. Armed with this knowledge, I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Little did I know the Homeowner Association had no intention of playing by the rules. Their next move would push me to the brink and ignite a battle that would consume my life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of tension and fear. The break-in had shaken me, but it also fueled my resolve. I was not going to let the Homeowner Association bully me into submission. The cameras I installed captured footage of suspicious activity at night. Unknown individuals loitering near my workshop in cars with tinted windows driving by repeatedly. I handed the footage over to the police, but they brushed it off as inconclusive. Meanwhile, Meredith Lang, the Homeowner Association president, stepped up her efforts to force me into compliance. She sent letters accusing me of violating zoning regulations and operating without proper permits, all false claims. I responded through my attorney, refuting every accusation with documented evidence. But the letters kept coming, each more threatening than the last. One day I found Karen standing at the edge of my property, her arms crossed and her face twisted in disdain. "You're ruining the neighborhood, you know," she snapped. "We've all worked so hard to make this community pristine, and your workshop is an eyesore." "Karen, my workshop predates this homeowner association, And it's not part of your jurisdiction, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. If you have a problem, take it up with the law. Oh, we will, she sneered, and you'll see. True to her word, the Homeowner Association's tactics became more aggressive. Contractors hired by the association started maintenance projects along the boundary of my property. They tore up part of my driveway under the guise of fixing a drainage issue and left it in disrepair. When I confronted them, they shrugged and said they were following orders. The final straw came one evening when I returned home to find a newly erected fence cutting through my property, blocking access to a portion of my land. A sign hung from the fence read, Homeowner Association Community Improvements. No trespassing. Furious, I called my attorney who filed an injunction to halt any further actions by the Homeowner Association. But the damage was already done. I decided to hold a community meeting to expose the Homeowner Association's tactics. Flyers went out to every resident, detailing the harassment and illegal activities I'd endured. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Neighbors whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances at Meredith Lang and her allies who sat in the front row with smug expressions. I began by presenting the evidence. Photographs of the vandalism, the threatening letters, and the footage of suspicious activity. This is what your homeowner association is doing, I said, my voice steady but firm. They're abusing their power to intimidate and control anyone who dares to stand up to them. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen shot to her feet, pointing a finger at me. You're lying. You've always been a troublemaker, and now you're trying to drag us all into your mess. Really? I countered, pulling out a copy of the forged zoning violation notice. Then explain this. And this, I added, showing a photo of the fence cutting through my property. Does that look like community improvement to you? The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some neighbors nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Meredith Lang stood, her expression icy. Mr. Hayes, your accusations are baseless. The Homeowner Association is committed to the betterment of this community. If you refuse to cooperate, you're the one creating division. I locked eyes with her, my anger barely contained. The only division here is the one you've created by abusing your authority. This isn't about community, it's about control. The meeting ended in chaos, with neighbors arguing amongst themselves and Karen storming out in a huff. Despite the tension, I could tell that some residents were starting to question the Homeowner Association's actions. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope. That hope was short-lived. The next morning I woke up to find my workshop vandalized again. This time the damage was worse. Windows were shattered, equipment was stolen, and a note was left behind. You can't win. I contacted the police once more, but their response was lukewarm at best. Frustrated and desperate, I turned to social media, posting photos of the damage and detailing my ordeal. The post went viral, drawing attention from local journalists and community activists. Within days, reporters were knocking on my door, eager to hear my story. The added publicity seemed to rattle the Homeowner Association. Meredith Lang issued a public statement denying any involvement in the vandalism and accusing me of slandering the association. But the damage to their reputation had already begun. Behind the scenes, I dug deeper into the Homeowner Association's finances and discovered questionable transactions involving a construction company owned by Meredith's brother. It became clear that the community improvements were a cover for embezzlement. Armed with this information, I prepared to take the fight to the next level. The battle was far from over, but for the first time I felt like I had the upper hand. The Homeowner Association had underestimated me, and they were about to pay the price for their corruption. With the evidence of the Homeowner Association's corruption in hand, I knew I had a chance to expose them. My social media posts had drawn the attention of investigative journalist Dana Whitaker, who reached out for an interview. We met at a local cafe where I shared the details of my ordeal and the documents linking Meredith Lang to the construction company. Dana promised to dig deeper and publish the truth. As Dana worked on her story, I focused on strengthening my case. My attorney helped file an official complaint against the Homeowner Association with the county's regulatory board. We also began preparing a lawsuit for property damage, harassment, and financial losses. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to see it through. Meanwhile, the Homeowner Association's tactics grew even more desperate. Late one night, I was woken by the sound of breaking glass. Rushing outside, I found my truck's windows shattered and the tires slashed. A spray-painted message on the side read, "Leave or else." The sight filled me with a mix of rage and dread. I called the police, who arrived to document the damage, but offered little hope of finding the culprits. Frustrated, I reviewed the security footage from my cameras. It captured two masked individuals carrying out the vandalism. Though their identities were hidden, the footage was a crucial piece of evidence. The next day, Dana's article hit the newsstands. It was a scathing exposé of the Homeowner Association's corruption, complete with details of the fraudulent transactions and first-hand accounts of their harassment tactics. The story caused an uproar in the community. Neighbors began questioning Meredith Lang's leadership and the Homeowner Association's true motives. Karen, ever the loyal supporter of the Homeowner Association, tried to rally the community in defense of Meredith. She organized a meeting claiming that the accusations were lies meant to destroy the neighborhood's harmony. I decided to attend, determined to confront them head-on. The meeting was held in the community center, packed with residents both supportive and skeptical of the Homeowner Association. Meredith stood at the front, flanked by Karen and a few other board members. Her calm demeanor belied the chaos brewing around her. "These baseless accusations are an attack on our community," Meredith began, her voice smooth and authoritative. "We have always acted in the best interests of our residents." I stood up, holding a stack of evidence. "If that's true, how do you explain these transactions?" I demanded, handing copies of the documents to several residents. "The construction company you've been hiring for community improvements is owned by your brother, and those so-called improvements have been nothing but harassment and vandalism." The room erupted in murmurs and gasps. Meredith's composure faltered for a split second before she regained her poise. "These are fabricated documents," she said, her voice laced with disdain. "Mr. Hayes has been spreading lies to cover up his own violations." "Violations," I shot back. "Like the illegal fence you put up on my property, or the vandalism you orchestrated against my workshop? I have footage of your hired goons in action." Dana, who had accompanied me to the meeting, stood up and addressed the crowd. "I've verified the documents and interviewed multiple sources. This isn't fabrication, it's fact. The Homeowner Association has been exploiting its power for personal gain." The tension in the room was palpable. Neighbors began demanding answers from Meredith, who struggled to maintain control. Karen, visibly flustered, tried to shout down the growing dissent, but was met with boos and jeers. As the meeting descended into chaos, Meredith abruptly announced that the session was over and stormed out with her allies. It was a small victory, but the fight was far from over. The Homeowner Association's power was shaken, but not broken. In the days that followed, the backlash against the Homeowner Association intensified. More residents came forward with their own stories of harassment and questionable fines. A petition circulated calling for a full audit of the Homeowner Association's finances and the removal of Meredith Lang as president. One evening, as I reviewed my legal preparations, I received an anonymous email. It contained scanned copies of internal Homeowner Association documents, minutes from secret meetings, detailed plans for the harassment campaigns, and evidence of bribes paid to local officials. The sender's identity was hidden, but the information was a goldmine. I forwarded the documents to my attorney and Dana, who began piecing together an even larger picture of corruption. The evidence was undeniable, and it was time to take the next step. We filed a lawsuit against the Homeowner Association, naming Meredith Lang and several board members as defendants. The case attracted widespread attention, with local media covering every development. Meredith's confident facade began to crack as the walls closed in around her. Despite the progress, I knew the battle wasn't over. The Homeowner Association still had resources and allies, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. But for the first time, it felt like justice was within reach. My resolve was stronger than ever, and I was prepared to see this through to the end. The lawsuit against the Homeowner Association was a turning point. As the legal proceedings began, Meredith Lang and her allies scrambled to maintain their grip on the community. Public support for the Homeowner Association had dwindled, and their once fearsome reputation was in tatters. Yet they still had resources and connections, and they were not going to surrender without a fight. My attorney, a sharp and determined woman named Allison Carter, worked tirelessly to build our case. We had mountains of evidence, financial records, internal emails, footage of the vandalism, and witness testimonies. But the Homeowner Association's legal team was equally determined, filing motion after motion to delay the case and intimidate witnesses. Despite the delays, the pressure on Meredith continued to mount. Local media outlets ran stories exposing her corruption, and more residents came forward with their own accounts of harassment and shady dealings. The community's anger boiled over during a public hearing organized by the county to address the Homeowner Association's actions. The hearing was packed, with standing room only. Residents lined up to share their grievances, each story painting a damning picture of the Homeowner Association's reign. One elderly couple recounted how they had been fined repeatedly for minor landscaping issues, forced to sell their home at a loss to escape the constant harassment. Another resident revealed how his construction business had been blacklisted after refusing to pay kickbacks to Meredith. When it was my turn to speak, I presented the internal documents we had received anonymously. The room fell silent as I read aloud excerpts detailing the Homeowner Association's plans to target dissenters and manipulate community funds. Meredith sat stone-faced, but her hands clenched tightly on the table before her. "This is not leadership," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. "This is exploitation, and it ends now." The hearing concluded with the county announcing a formal investigation into the Homeowner Association's activities. It was another victory, but it came at a cost. That night, I found a threatening letter taped to my door. "Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it," it read, accompanied by a crude drawing of my workshop in flames. I reported the threat to the police, who assured me they would increase patrols in the area. But I wasn't taking any chances. I upgraded my security system and started keeping a close watch on my property. The fight was taking a toll, but I refused to back down. Meanwhile, Dana Whitaker continued her investigation. Her latest report uncovered a web of connections between the Homeowner Association, local officials, and the construction company owned by Meredith's brother. The revelations were explosive, sparking calls for resignations and further inquiries. Dana's relentless pursuit of the truth was inspiring, and her work brought even more public scrutiny to the Homeowner Association. As the trial date approached, Meredith's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She avoided public appearances and was rumored to have clashed with other board members. Karen, once her most vocal supporter, began to distance herself, claiming she had been misled about the Homeowner Association's actions. It was clear that the pressure was fracturing their once united front. Then came the breaking point. A former Homeowner Association board member, tired of the lies and manipulation, decided to come forward. He contacted my attorney and provided a sworn affidavit detailing the inner workings of the Homeowner Association. His testimony revealed how Meredith had used Homeowner Association funds for personal expenses, orchestrated harassment campaigns, and bribed officials to cover up her actions. The affidavit was a bombshell. Allison immediately filed it with the court, strengthening our case and putting Meredith on the defensive. The media seized on the story, and public opinion turned decisively against the Homeowner Association. Residents began organizing to demand Meredith's resignation and a complete overhaul of the association. Despite their crumbling support, the Homeowner Association's legal team continued to fight. They attempted to discredit me, claiming I had fabricated evidence and orchestrated the vandalism myself. It was a desperate move, and it backfired spectacularly when Allison presented irrefutable proof of the Homeowner Association's involvement in the crimes. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed with reporters, residents, and supporters. The tension was palpable as witnesses testified, laying bare the Homeowner Association's corruption and abuse of power. Meredith's smug demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim, defensive posture. Her legal team's attempts to deflect blame only served to highlight their desperation. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke with unwavering conviction. I recounted the threats, the vandalism, and the relentless harassment I had endured. "This isn't just about me," I said. "It's about standing up to corruption and defending what's right." The trial was a turning point. By its conclusion, the evidence against the Homeowner Association was overwhelming. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding damages for the vandalism and harassment and ordering a full audit of the Homeowner Association's finances. Meredith Lang was removed from her position and faced criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of the battle lifted from my shoulders. The fight had been long and grueling, but justice had prevailed. The Homeowner Association's reign of terror was over, and the community was finally free to rebuild. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my neighbors, I knew the work wasn't finished. Change wouldn't come overnight, and there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in months, I felt hope. Hope that we could create a community built on fairness, trust, and respect. The verdict against Meredith Lang and the Homeowner Association was a turning point, but it was only the beginning of the community's journey toward healing. As the court proceedings concluded, the fallout from the Homeowner Association's corruption sent ripples through the neighborhood and beyond. Meredith was sentenced to several years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Other board members involved in the scheme faced hefty fines and were permanently barred from holding positions in any community organizations. For me, the relief was immense but bittersweet. The battle had taken its toll. My workshop had been vandalized, my reputation dragged through the mud, and my peace of mind shattered. Yet I couldn't ignore the newfound sense of solidarity within the community. Neighbors who had once been divided by fear and manipulation began to come together, determined to rebuild what the Homeowner Association had torn apart. The first step was dismantling the remnants of the corrupt regime. A group of residents formed an interim committee to oversee the transition. They reached out to me, asking for my input on how to ensure transparency and fairness moving forward. Though I was hesitant at first, I agreed to help. After all, I had fought so hard for justice. It was only right to see it through. One of the committee's first actions was to commission a thorough audit of the Homeowner Association's finances. The results were shocking. Tens of thousands of dollars had been siphoned off into personal accounts, and numerous fake invoices had been submitted to cover up the theft. The funds recovered from these schemes were redirected toward repairing the damage caused by the Homeowner Association's negligence. As the community began to rebuild, I focused on restoring my workshop. The outpouring of support from neighbors was overwhelming. People volunteered their time and resources to help me repair the damage. One evening, as we worked late into the night, an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Caldwell approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry for doubting you. You've shown us what true courage looks like. Thank you for standing up for all of us." Her words touched me deeply. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose beyond my own struggle. This wasn't just about me or my workshop. It was about creating a better future for everyone in the neighborhood. The media's coverage of the trial and its aftermath brought attention to the systemic issues with homeowner associations. Local legislators began drafting new regulations to prevent similar abuses of power. These reforms were a small but significant step toward protecting the rights of property owners. Meanwhile, Dana Whitaker continued her investigative reporting, using my case as a catalyst for a broader expose on corruption in homeowner associations across the state. Her articles shed light on countless other victims, inspiring them to come forward and demand accountability. Months after the trial, the neighborhood held its first open election for a new homeowner association board. The process was transparent and inclusive, with candidates presenting detailed plans for how they would prioritize the community's needs. I was honored when several neighbors suggested I run for a position, but I declined. My role in the fight had been about justice, not power. Instead, I supported candidates who shared a vision of fairness and collaboration. The election marked a new chapter for the community. The newly elected board immediately set to work repairing relationships and addressing long-neglected issues. They organized community events, implemented fair policies, and created a transparent system for addressing concerns. Slowly but surely, trust was rebuilt. For me, life began to settle into a new normal. My workshop flourished as word spread about my craftsmanship and the resilience I had shown in the face of adversity. Clients from across the region sought me out, not just for my work, but for the story behind it. Each piece I crafted became a symbol of perseverance and integrity. On the one-year anniversary of the trial, the community organized a block party to celebrate how far we had come. As I stood among my neighbors, watching children play and friends laugh, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The scars from the battle were still there, but they had become reminders of what we had overcome together. Looking back, the fight against the Homeowner Association was one of the hardest challenges I had ever faced. It tested my resolve, pushed me to my limits, and taught me the value of standing up for what's right. But it also showed me the strength of community and the power of resilience. As the sun set on the party, Mrs. Caldwell raised a toast. To Lucas Hayes, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd, for reminding us that even in the darkest times, one person can make a difference. The cheers that followed were deafening, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace.